Okay, we are officially live. So first things first, Dr. Leta, thank you for doing this interview. I really appreciate it.
So happy to be here, Grayson.
Yeah. And for the people listening, Dr. Leta here was one of my teachers at Five Branches. So it's a cool thing to like have it come full circle where we're getting to do a podcast here. So again, thank you. And just to give my listeners a background, Dr. Leta, can you kind of give, I always like with the Chinese medicine people, a little bit of a background, like why you got into Chinese medicine, what you're doing with it now. And that gives people kind of an infrastructure of just, what we're going to talk about here.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't grow up thinking, I want to stick needles in people.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, absolutely not. You know, I was living in San Francisco at the time, just felt like I wanted to move out west. I grew up on Cape Cod via Vietnam and did my undergrad in New York and felt that I wanted to experience California. So working in San Francisco for Levi Strauss. And when I got the phone call that my sister had 3 to 6 months to live. And it was one of those things where I grew up in a family. I mean, I hope every family's like this, that you do anything. You drop everything for your family. My sister's my best friend. So within 3 days, I packed up my whole life after living out west for a few years and was home. And honestly, Grayson, at this point in my journey, I didn't really know anything about health.
Yeah.
Obviously I eat fruits and vegetables, but there might be days where lettuce on my chicken sandwich was my vegetables.
Right.
Just being honest.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So but I couldn't get my head around, and this was pride, ignorance. How could this man, it was a gentleman, there's a bunch of different doctors at Boston Mass General Hospital and Brigham Young Women's Hospital in Boston, where they gave such a finite sentence, and the immediate reaction was, well, you don't know my family, you don't know us, we're different,
right?
We're kind of warriors, and now I kind of, I'm glad I didn't know much, and I had that kind of tenacity, that spirit, that kind of fighter in me, because once the spirit is gone, the will to live, we know that the physical can really, take over.
Absolutely.
So in hindsight, but yeah, so I went home and, I opened up the Yellow Pages and found a nursery, and I went and bought Roots, and there was dial-up Yahoo news groups at that point, and I was like combing through those, and I found a burdock tea. So I went to the nursery, boiled some, roots and herbs, which I knew nothing about, had her drink this nasty tea, very bitter. I discovered Mishokushi, so macrobiotic cooking, understanding bitter and, all these other things. Brought in really woo-woo healers. The only thing I'd ever experienced was a chiropractor at this point, growing up as a gymnast. But kind of biohacked, but not knowing anything. And, it's a little scary. I mean, I guess I just, I didn't know anything. So fast forward, out of the groups of women, the number of women that went through that chemo and that radiation, my understanding is that no one lived. My sister was the only one that lived. And she doesn't have any side effects from chemo and radiation. Not only did she live, she had no lasting side effects of chemo and radiation from the diet and from the herbal medicine and the energy medicine. Mm-hmm. And she's fine.
Right.
So from that moment, I said to myself, what if Americans, what if individuals do not have someone that had that kind of conviction for life? What if someone took that statement from that, that powerful, brilliant doctor in a white coat as truth for them? So I just made a point in that time. I didn't know if I was really going to go into medicine, but I wanted to have better conversations. I wanted us to ask better questions around such a, a finite diagnosis. It was challenging for me. Yeah. And so I knew I wanted to go into education. I knew I wanted to kind of open up, I wasn't really sure, but I knew there was something there for me, and I wanted to help.
Yeah.
I wanted to help.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's a good place to be, I think, to want to help. And I think once we get the doors open, the appropriate doors that are fitting for us, when we actually get to walk through that, it feels pretty good. Like, oh yeah, this is like, I want to do this, right? This makes sense to me. This is a way to help and to get into that. How did the Five Branches, with the university that I went to, and that you were, do you still teach at Five Branches now?
I do.
Very cool.
I do.
How did that come to pass? Did you, like, how did the Five Branches thing come into pass, where you actually went from, Chinese medicine to actually teaching at a, acupuncture college?
Yeah, great question. Once this whole transpired, I looked into the next path. And to make a long story short, after that experience with my sister, I felt as though instead of going right back into corporate, I needed to do something for me, because, life is so precious. Yeah. And I had made the decision to go to Hawaii and surf, or go to Tahoe and snowboard.
Nice. Yeah, it's good options.
Random.
Right.
I hadn't done either. So
right.
So a friend of mine around a bonfire at the end of the summer, Cape Cod, said, I'll go to Tahoe. So went to Tahoe. Long story short, I got a bunch of jobs, had a house set up, Squaw Valley. First time down the mountain, I fell and chipped my tailbone and was out. So
that's a horrible injury.
Horrible injury. But not only that, I drove 3,000 miles, bought a 4Runner, got 3 jobs, rented a house, and I'm out for the season. And to be honest with you, I couldn't stay there.
Yeah.
I mean, because people were so excited to ski. And
right.
So I went into, if anyone knows Tahoe City, there was this little bookstore, a little woo-woo, like little right in Tahoe City. And I went in there, and this woman came out of this beaded door and said, darling, what's going on? And I said, I just moved here and I need to leave and I don't know where to go. And so she said, hold on. She goes back and she brings me this little vial, a little glass vial with some liquid in it. And she says, this is wild oat. And I didn't know what that was. Some flower essence or essential oil. She goes, go home and meditate. And 45 minutes later, your path will become clear. And I'm thinking, oh, geez.
Yeah, here we go, right?
Here we go.
Here we go.
And I've never meditated. She goes, just sit down and quiet your eyes,
Yeah.
So I did, and the message was go to Vietnam, and I was born there. I got airlifted out from the war, and I never thought about going to Vietnam. Go to the journey. Don't need to really just talk about the journey, but when I got back from the journey, I never dealt with my tailbone from Tahoe. Went to a cranial sacralist, and the cranial, someone who's recommended. I went back to waitressing.
Yep.
She said, I never do this after a session, but I need to ask you a question. And I said, what? And she says, what are you doing here? And I said, I don't know. And she said, you're an acupuncturist.
Oh, crazy.
And I had never even heard about it. I didn't even know. I said, needles? No.
Yeah.
So I went home and I typed in the word. I probably spelled it wrong. And when you type in something, there's a little sentence. I mean, it's longer, but you see, when you're doing a Google search, there's a sentence.
Yep.
And it said the balance between art and science in the description of the word.
Yep.
And all the hair stood up on my arms.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I needed to learn acupuncture. And 2 weeks later, I was enrolled in pre-med. So I had to do a year of pre-med, and I did it on the Cape. And then and the reason I chose Five Branches is because when I was doing that pre-med, I went and visited the only 3 acupuncturists on Cape Cod. And one woman said, the only school to go to is Five Branches.
Yep.
And so I just took it as truth.
And then right after your time at Five Branches, were you offered a teaching position soon after that to actually teach at Five Branches?
I did. I've been working there for 17 years.
Wow.
I'm very loyal.
Yeah. You've been there a bit, right?
Well, my parents are teachers. I kind of resisted teaching.
Yeah.
But I realized I really love it. I love to give back. It allows me to stay fresh in the conversation. Of course, I mean, we all teach each other. Mm-hmm. But Ron, the president, was super nice. He saw my success and said, come teach what you learn, come teach what you know.
Oh, that's
and
great.
the classes have really changed a lot through the years. I teach 3 required business classes, and they're very different.
Yeah.
The third semester is more personal growth. How do we want this medicine to come through us? How do we want to be in the world?
Yeah.
And through the Taoist lens, and offer that to Westerners. And then also, the next semester, at least the last semester, which I'm teaching now, the career development 3, it's hands-on.
Yeah.
It's you're to graduate. It's like you just have to make decisions at this point.
Nose to the grindstone. Like, what the hell are you actually going to do? Yeah, I mean, that's legitimate and I think it's really good because that's a conversation I'm having with a lot of Chinese medicine people now is about, okay, so we go through school, but Chinese medicine is a universe. It's a very broad spectrum of things that can be implemented to make life better. And yeah, what's your niche and how are you going to express it through your lens, but also right through the lens of Chinese medicine? That's a big, really important, relevant question that I think, excuse me, all TCM practitioners need to be asking themselves. Like, what am I going to, excuse me, what am I going to do with this, and how's this going to look in real time once I'm out and active and in the world of Chinese medicine? And just to add to your point, about how Chinese medicine sort of found you. Someone said to you, it's amazing. There's not a ton of people say that. And I would say you and I share a very common thread. That way Chinese medicine found me. And I remember at the time I was training martial arts with a group of people who I didn't know were all 5 Branches students. They were all training Kung Fu. And I was in the class and I was like, you train like 4 hours a day. You're all really fit and just, your eyes are bright. And I'm like, what the hell do you guys do? And they're like, oh, we go to 5 Branches. I'm like, what's 5 Branches? And they told me, and I was like, so you guys do Kung Fu and heal people? And they're like, yeah. And I was, this is my favorite line was like, okay, so I'm quitting my job and I'm going to start doing this because this sounds cool. And, but it was, in the end, it really came down to a conversation. I was sitting with my girlfriend at the time at breakfast, and I just blurted out. I said, I'm going to sign up for 5 Branches and go to acupuncture school. And she said, what? And I said, what? Like, what? But it kind of just came out of me. It was one of these weird things. But I like that Chinese medicine, and I think these larger paths that we walk in life can find us that way. It's pretty cool. There's a serendipity to that I really appreciate and really enjoy. And I have to ask you this because I told my good buddy, you remember Paul Robison?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so Paul is in DC. He's doing really well with acupuncture. He's actually on the podcast coming up here in an episode or two. But we were having this conversation, and it was a funny story about you and when we were in your class. And I don't know if you remember this because, okay, so we were in your marketing class, and Paul and I were sitting in the back row. This is years ago. I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. And we're sitting in class, and you were talking to us about longevity and breathing cycles. And you talked about tortoise breathing, and you were saying, you're like, the tortoise can take like a minute inhale and a minute exhale. And for whatever reason, it was kind of just an anecdotal thing you were talking about. But Paul and I looked at each other. We were a few seats away, and we're like, let's try this. Like, we kind of mouthed like, that's a cool, we should just try that right now. And so we started looking up at the clock, and you were talking, and both of us were glued to the clock, and we were practicing this like minute-long inhale, and we're like, and we're sitting there, and about 40 seconds into it, you stop talking, and you're like, what the hell are you guys doing? Because we were just in the back row staring at the clock, and we both just started to laugh, and we're like, I'm sorry, we were both ignoring what you were just saying and trying the turtle breathing technique, but we were both like, God, we just got caught red-handed because we're staring at the clock like weirdos. Trying this breathing technique, but it was so funny because you're like, you were like, it's fine, but just you guys were just having this blank stare at the clock, like, is the class this boring? And we were like, no, definitely not. We're just trying this breathing technique, but it was funny. It was funny as hell. We laughed when we got out.
Oh my God, that's awesome!
So I wasn't sure if you remembered that or not, but
no, I love that.
It was really good. So I told Paul, I'll tell Leta the story on the podcast for sure.
That's
so.
Great.
But in any case,
I think it's one of those things. I mean, not just for Chinese medical practitioners or doctors, but I think for all of us, it's like, what's mine to do? When you think about, when you become a Chinese medical practitioner, there's all these branches, 8, 9 branches.
Yeah.
But also just anybody in the world right now, the world that we're living in. There is a little bit of urgency to think about what's genuinely yours to do, what's your genius.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot to do. But if I always ask myself, what's occupying my mind? What's laying on my heart? Mm-hmm. And it's like, once I understand the heart-kidney connection around will, it's like I might have will, I might have legacy. Well, we all do. But if it's connected to my heart, then I know I can bring it out to the world,
Right.
And I got caught up as a woman, making obviously sure that I'm acting from a divine feminine place, but also what I should say yes to and discernment, and what do I say no to? Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because women tend to be more wired to give.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think all of us, once we get into Chinese medical school, there's so many branches, even the ones that can't be taught because they're trying to keep the school to 4 or 5 years, but I Ching, Feng Shui, Qine San,
Right.
all the things that are amazing,
Mm-hmm.
amazing. That we at least get to start the journey when we're done with school. So,
yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of where I found myself. And while I was in school too, I remember thinking, once I was kind of hip to the idea that there are so many branches that I'm interested in, I thought, oh man, first of all, I'm going to have to make some decisions because I'm just not going to live long enough to master all of them, right? I'm going to have to just narrow my list down. And that's been a process in and of itself. But I think I've enjoyed that process. It's been really cool and fun. But Dr. Leta, this brings me to my next question, the segue into when I talked to you prior to this podcast, and I had said, I know you've moved into the CBD scene and, mm-hmm. and the medical application of that, and just what that looks like. And I really want to hear about that for a few different reasons. So let me give you the framework mm-hmm. I'm thinking about and the things that my audience and the clients that I work with, the questions that have come mm-hmm. up. It's, just, I guess, the general efficacy of what you've seen in, clinical practice with these things. A little bit about the science of how it works, mm-hmm. why it's important, and then just the larger narrative of why we should be talking about this, because it seems like it's a big movement right now, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that. I know that's a lot, but, dive into that however you would like to.
Yeah. It's a huge conversation. Mm-hmm. So, I got my doctorate,
yes.
In acupuncture and oriental medicine, and you have to do a capstone. And my capstone was on the history and therapeutic implications of cannabis, mm-hmm. and then also layered in within traditional Chinese medicine. And so from my research, cannabis has been used since 8,000 BC.
Wow.
Every indigenous culture, every culture since the beginning of time has used cannabis mm-hmm. for tons of different things. So that's the first thing to know.
It's important.
And it's important, right? Yeah. It's not new.
Yeah, right.
The second thing to notice, because we are in the United States, is that, in the 1850s to the 1930s, if you went to your medical doctor, they would prescribe cannabis for a lot of different conditions. It wasn't, we don't have to go into the legislation, but the one thing I really want to make note is Google the U.S. patent in 1999. So 20 years ago, the U.S. government knew, and the patent is on the medical benefits of cannabinoids, right? Uh-huh. The oil that's extracted from a cannabis plant to have a medical benefit as an antioxidant and a neuroprotectant.
Right.
So what's interesting about this country is a definition of a Schedule I drug means no therapeutic benefit at all.
Yeah, that's so frustrating.
It's frustrating, but it's important to know our history, and we know, if you don't know, you can just Google the history of cannabis. We don't have to go into it.
Right.
But it was about who had money to lobby in DC. Right. It was a paper company businessman who thought hemp was a competitor. So mm-hmm. that's important to know. So the government has already known mm-hmm. the medical benefits of cannabis. And so now the reason people are talking about it is because people haven't had access to it.
Yeah.
Okay. If you look at human studies, the clinical trials on the medical benefits of cannabinoids, I mean, it's everything. Yeah. ADD, Alzheimer's, anorexia, epilepsy, neuropathy, seizures, MS, nausea, vomiting. I mean, glaucoma, hepatitis, chronic pain. I could list dozens and dozens and dozens of clinical trials that have proven that cannabinoids, the chemical constituent of the oil from the plant, has amazing medical benefits. Now, Grayson, the question I always ask my patients is, why does one plant, one herb, affect pretty much every human being? And it's because of this system called the endocannabinoid system. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if your clients know about it, or patients, or your listeners, but I would say it's literally like opening up the New York Times today and it's saying, hey, humans, you now have a cardiovascular system. Right. It's like this is news for people. And so the endocannabinoid system is a system that its main job is homeostasis. So if things are overactive, like we can't shut our head down, to go to bed, it's going to quiet things down. If you wake up in the morning, you're a little bit sluggish, or in the afternoon, you're a little sluggish, it's going to rev things up. So it's homeostasis. There's a lot of parallels with Chinese medicine, with yin and yang, the basics. And in fact, acupuncture, there's all aspects of Chinese medicine work on the endocannabinoid system. So that our nervous system, we have a lot of receptors, a lot of receptor sites. Well, the endocannabinoid system is believed to have more than the nervous system.
Whoa.
Yes.
Can I ask a quick question there?
Yes.
So, and I've thought about this. So I've read about this, and I definitely don't have the in-depth knowledge that you've got, which is why we're talking about this. But I've read about this, the ECS, the endocannabinoid system, ECS for short. And my question, when I've seen the diagrams and I've seen the imagery about the ECS and what this looks like in the body, the way they're looking at this, and if it has more receptors than, say, the nervous system, is the ECS, I guess, geographically in the body, right? If we look at those anatomy pictures of, say, the nervous system, we can see geographically where it resides in the body. Is this system piggybacking on top of the nervous system or some other system in the body, or is it sort of dispersed and spread out evenly through all systems? I'm unclear on that. Like, where does it actually sit in the body?
It's a great question. So they're kind of saying there's dozens of receptors. They're called cannabinoid receptors, and because they're naming it after the cannabis plant. But there's two main receptors, very specific receptors, that are predominant in the body. So they're called cannabinoid 1 receptor and cannabinoid 2, and they're only named 1 and 2 based on location. And so an easy way to remember is that CB1, so cannabinoid 1 receptors, are mainly brain and central nervous system, so nerves. There are some specific organs, but think of that. So yes, those are pretty much following the pathways of the nerves.
Got it.
Okay, but CB2 receptor, we think of immune. Right? So T cells, B cells, macrophages, lymphocytes, GI tract, spleen. So I think it's both. I think it's both. Kind of like with the meridians, right? So some of them are going to follow the bloodline. Some of them might not. So that's kind of how I view it. But what's interesting in the research that I did is for literally 600 million years, every living thing except for plants, fungi, algae have this built-in endocannabinoid system and receptor system. It started with the sea squirt.
Wow.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. All the way up to mouse, rat, monkey, and now human. That's why, pet CBD is super popular.
Right.
So it's not, 600 million years ago is when these receptors evolved.
And when we look at this, the endocannabinoid system, and maybe this is an overly simplified question, but it's one that's running through my head.
Yeah.
If we have the ECS built into our body, and say mice do, and all these mammals, does this mean that fundamentally we're supposed to have cannabis in our bodies to some capacity? Is that kind of what we're looking at in the larger picture here, or is that oversimplified?
No. So basically, and remember the last discovery at like a part of this system is 1995.
Okay.
So I'll get to that, but so that's why it's new. Okay. So first is you have this system in your brain, all over your body, everywhere, and your brain literally produces, think of it as like a neurotransmitter, you produce a cannabinoid. So we could call it CBD, but it's a little bit more than that. So it's a naturally occurring in the brain, and you make it on demand based on what your body needs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but this is why cannabis is so huge right now. If you're deficient and you're not making these chemicals to balance your body, you can take it from a cannabis plant.
Mm-hmm.
So this, I mean, it's not like you can drink kale juice.
Right.
You have to take the oil from the cannabis plant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a few other things that I can talk about that will mimic, like terpenes will mimic cannabinoids, but they're not going to do what the cannabis plant does.
Wow.
So that's why this is like news for people.
It is.
This is huge, and this is also why there's been a lot of controversy.
Of course.
And we live in a time where pharmaceuticals and the government and companies, and there's a little bit of money. So, distinguishing service-based farmers and products and companies versus financial.
Yeah.
So, but that's the blessing. The blessing is, I mean, at this point, I always say to people, okay, let's step back for a second. You have this built-in system.
Right.
You make cannabinoids to make sure that you're upright and functioning and present, and you have good digestion and good energy and everything's good. But if you're not, if you have a symptom or, God forbid, a chronic disease, you can take the oil from the cannabis plant to kind of resuscitate, to lubricate these receptors that might be dehydrated, to get things going again so you can come back to homeostasis.
And so that follows suit to kind of my next question, following this organic train of thought. If I've used that analogy when I've talked to friends about this and colleagues, and I've said, look, I'm not an expert in this, so I don't know conceptually, but what I've read, I've used that analogy very much, where it's we have this system, and if the body is dehydrated, that's exactly the words I've used. If our body is deficient in it, we can kind of suck that up and hold on to it. And so does that mean, in theory, that I guess can cannabis be used or taken intermittently, and where your body is full for a period of time, and then you can peel back, and then over time, those numbers drop or saturation levels drop, and then you take it again and your body sort of fills back up? And if that's the case, does that vary from person to person, or is there any guideline for?
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Great
question. So I always ask people, don't you just want to make your own? Don't you want to know how to make your own?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the first thing, okay?
Right.
Because we want to limit, finances and all that kind of stuff. And then obviously if you have to digest and assimilate.
Yep.
The first thing is, in order to make, these naturally occurring cannabinoids in the brain, you have to have nutrition and dietary cofactors. So like omega-6, okay? So if you don't have nutrition, that's what's going to make this. Okay, so that I really want to emphasize that, because we have to start with food. We have to start with vegetables and fruits. I mean, it's really important. Most people don't get the right ratios of omegas. Because in some ways I view CBD oil as a fat.
Yeah,
it's an oil.
It's an oil.
So
right.
omega-6. So again, our omegas are a little bit off. So has CBD oil been answered prayer for people? Yes, because they haven't had access to it. But I always, in the cannabis conversation, let's go back to the basics. Clearing the mind, breathing, moving your body, eating well, hydration, water. I mean, it's really important to be honest with ourselves on how are we doing. We've had access to turmeric or acupuncture for pain. Maybe it was a different pathway. CBD is the one thing that can really help, but you've already tried those other things for pain.
Yep.
So I just want to keep that container. But as far as I just want people to make cannabinoids, first, and then if they're not making them, then yes, take it from an oil. So there's a couple things that happen. Number one is, when you take the oil, first of all, about epigenetics, right? You have our DNA, you have it being expressed, you have genes turning on and off based on lifestyle. Okay. I'm adopted. So when the United States government did a study on adopted children, and they figured out that they have the same chronic disease as their adopted parents, they realized it's because of diet and lifestyle and beliefs. And so with Bruce Lipton, biology is not by belief, or epigenetics. It's like, okay, you can turn on and off genes. CBD affects 1,200 DNA.
Wow.
in genes. And it turns on and off. So the good news is that once you're taking in the CBD, I've seen clinically with patients, it affects them within an hour, or some people it's been up to about 5.5 months.
Right.
And it depends on so many factors, pharmaceuticals, medication, alcohol use.
Right.
There's a lot of lifestyle, environmental factors, and some people have heavy metals in their mouth. Some people have like full of mold. So that's kind of a bigger conversation. But to answer your question, I would say I teach patients that the cool thing is with this, because, it's a little bit pricey. It's more than Chinese herb.
Yeah.
They're paying more attention to, okay, let's take a snapshot of your goals with this oil. Let's get curious on how you feel after a few days, after a week, after a month. Most bottles last about a month. And then reassess, right? And then, you and I mean, in private practice, we have more of a holistic conversation, of course, about some other things. But then you get to a point where, to answer your question, if you need to be on it for a long time, can you take a break?
Right.
Once people start getting results with it and they're starting to feel good, I'll usually tell them, you can decide, let's take a break.
Awesome.
Right? Let's take a break. Let's see how you're doing. So then you know when you need it. So then when they introduce it again, they'll kind of get a sense of, okay, it's kind of like acupuncture. Okay, I kind of know I've done acupuncture enough, or I've done herbal medicine enough to know when do I need it. I want people to understand that for themselves. Okay?
Yeah, you put them in an empowered position to dialogue and understand their bodies too, which is really important. I think in the larger process of our health and evolution, you have to be accountable and attentive to your body. It's important. It's important.
Yeah. Some patients come in and they're like, I don't have a body.
Right.
I don't know how often I pee, or when my menstrual cycle is. It's like, okay, well let's get you in that body.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that it really depends on your lifestyle, Grayson, because when I'd love to talk even about the cycle of brain inflammation, but if people are drinking alcohol, or if people are on pharmaceuticals, or people that have metals in their mouth, or cooking with aluminum pans, or getting exposure like the Paradise Fires or the Houston floods, or, there's environmental toxins, EMF toxins. It really depends on the person, on if CBD is going to be a dietary supplement, just like a multivitamin official, again, depending on your beliefs.
Right.
So some people will need it. They will need it. And then some patients, if they're going to go have a glass of wine, they might do a dropper of CBD because they know it's going to upregulate like 517 pathways in the liver, right? Or they're for a stressful time, so you can, once you understand how to use it, you can use it as a tool. Yeah.
Let me ask you this question, because, and this is just a legitimate Chinese medicine question, and people listening as well. Adaptogenic herbs are a big thing nowadays. Ashwagandha and jiaogulan, the gynostemma pentaphyllum. There's a lot of different herbs that have these adaptogenic effects. Where does CBD fit into this spectrum? I guess, the cannabis plant, because it sounds like, at least in languaging, it sounds like it has this stress regulating thing that it's doing. Does it technically qualify, or is it in its own category? Is it its own thing?
It's in its own category. But I can share with you some things that are in a very similar category as cannabis, which is echinacea. So hujao, black pepper.
Yep.
Helichrysum, frankincense, liverwort, kava kava, maca, Chinese rhododendron, black truffle. So these are like what we consider terpenes. Terpenes and flavonoids are what give plants the color and the smell, but they also have medical benefits. These things mimic cannabinoids. Okay, so they do operate on the cannabis receptors, either cannabis 1 or cannabis 2 receptors. They may not operate on both receptors. So that's why if you're taking frankincense and you're really trying to affect your ovaries, you might be missing the mark. You actually just have to take the cannabis oil. So there's a deeper question there. But with this endocannabinoid system, you pretty much make 2 cannabinoids. Okay, so this is what's going to separate an adaptogen. When you take an adaptogen, which most I think people need at this point.
Yeah, agreed.
Yes, plant medicine is we all need plant medicine. I think of, just as a side note, I think of the five elements, the generating cycle. With the metal, we're in a very tech age.
Yes.
And so to be utilizing plants as the mother of metal, it really helps kind of offset the energy of the technology with these phones and everything. So that's why I'm a huge proponent of plants in general. But what's interesting is this. You make two different, like, on-demand cannabinoids. The first one is anandamide. I don't know if you have heard about this.
I have.
Okay, so this one is the Sanskrit for bliss. You produce anandamide when you're eating chocolate, when you're meditating, the runner's high. You think of those marathon people. You're naturally producing it. It's the bliss molecule. So people in our society that are depressed or low mood, have a lot of, are not kind of blissed out or not happy, they're not making this. Right. So the good news is that's why CBD has been beneficial for depression. But then the second one is, which is really, really curious for me, is called 2-arachidonoglycerol, and it's the motivation to be here and thrive molecule. And it's passed down from your mom in breast milk. It's also in animal milk. But this is more of a neuromodulator, so it's a little bit more of an adaptogen. But they haven't been able to, obviously, for good reason, they don't do human studies on this, because even though the rats could suckle, structure and function, they were fine to suckle from their mom. They blocked 2-AG from being produced in the brain, this cannabinoid, and they just killed over and died. Okay, wow. So obviously they can't do a human study, but they had no motivation to be here. Wow. Okay, and I think about people that are not connected to themselves. They're not. I mean, this is like not connected to their purpose, their legacy, why they're here, their genius. I feel that this system, this endocannabinoid system, might not have ever even been turned on their whole life. I mean, it could be generational, right? Lack of nutrition and stress and all that. So I feel like the cannabis plant is answered prayer. I feel that, Michael, the Botany of Desire, Michael Pollan, he has a new book, How to Change Your Mind, with psilocybin. But he said in Botany of Desire that humans have evolved for the plant. Yes. I mean, it's really interesting. It's pretty powerful. And I know in California, we're celebrating the fact that we have access to this medicine now. Yeah.
And people are so, I think, I always kind of am wondering about this, the instinctual response that people have to information as it comes out. We have instinctual responses to things, and collectively, yes, there's pushback because cannabis was demonized for so many years, but there's so many people that are instinctually hungry to learn about it, and I think people want it, because I think we do. As organisms, we instinctually know, I mean, God, if it's a part of our body, there's got to be a piece of us that's like, hold up, we should, and as we're learning, we're like we're getting all these green lights where we're saying we should probably be listening to this. We should probably be integrating this. Yeah, this seems fairly reasonable. And what's interesting, is I've heard you said neuroprotective, a little while back when you were first talking about the effects. And I was amazed years back before this research, at least for me, when I'd become exposed to it, how many people across many different fields, not just mainstream Westerners, but who were, I had heard old Chinese medicine practitioners talk about it. They're like, cannabis is a neurotoxin. And I remember thinking, are you sure? Because there sure seems to be a lot of information and a lot of research that is propagating and being explored that says quite the opposite. And I keep wondering, is it just the propaganda brainwashing that, when Nixon was, made everything class 1, anything that had medicinal value? And if that's, what have you seen with people? Is that a hurdle that you've had to sort of deconstruct? Like, hey guys, there was some bullshit afoot for a while as far as what was being circulated. And just like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you tell people that are coming from that place that I would say are more conservative and that are like, cannabis is still a devil medicine, and it's, all of that. Like, how do you tackle that, given that you're going to
great. Great question. Well, This is the deal, is that, they in the medical community. So to step back in this country, we have 4 different aspects of cannabis in this country. We have recreational, people that are doing recreational. We have medical, therapeutic, which is my domain. We have pharmaceutical, and we have corporate. Corporate is, I think, kind of the scary part. It's, CBD is in your shampoo and toothpaste and bath salts and everything. It's not that that's not good, but from a medical therapeutic benefit, my understanding, from Raphael Mechoulam and Ethan Russo, I'm happy to give people resources, is that you need a certain amount of cannabinoids to cross the blood-brain barrier in a certain amount of time to pull in the blood to then have access on demand when you need it. Okay, so what happened is that when cannabis became illegal, they coined the term marijuana to really target Mexicans as drug lords, Mary and Juan, right? So we don't use that word. We use cannabis. If you look at the plants.usda.gov and look at the nomenclature, everything is under cannabis sativa L. If you look at the family, genus, species, so it's all considered cannabis. So that's good to know. I always remind people that, we have cedar trees and redwood trees and, oak trees. We don't have to talk about how they got here, but there's naturally occurring many different kinds of species of cannabis, and some have low THC and some have high THC. So the low THC plants we call hemp. And so in this country, it was, with the passing of hemp, what they decided to do is if a farm is making a product, if you label it as hemp, it's really easy for school teachers and policemen and school bus drivers to just visually see it's considered by the FDA a dietary supplement. It's going to have under 0.03% THC, no psychoactive effect, approved for infants. So legal in all 50 states. So it's a little bit interesting time that we have until CBD is legal in all 50 states. Right now, we've had to kind of distinguish that as far as a supplement product market. But the last thing I was going to say on that is that let's see. Cannabis and coffee have a lot of mold on it, unfortunately. Okay. And then when cannabis became illegal as a Schedule I drug, people started growing it on their own. And they started to make it just for recreation, which they were breeding it for high THC. Okay. There are no receptors. So this system, the endocannabinoid system that I was talking about, there's no cannabis receptors in the brainstem. So you can never overdose, unlike opiates. Okay. It might, if you have too much THC, of course it feels like impending doom, but it won't stop your heart rate. It won't stop breathing. And so that's good to know. And in fact, as a side note, I've had patients, when cannabis became legal in California, I would have some moms in my practice say, my teenage son ate a pot brownie, and what do I do? Just keep a bottle of CBD on hand, because once you get CBD in the system, it plucks the THC off the receptors in the brain, and people start to come down. So that's just a little tip for you. But
Leta, can you say that one more time, just because the Skype cut out just for like 2 seconds there? So you were saying if you were kind of saying if someone had eaten a high THC dose to take CBD, because why?
Because what CBD will do is it'll pluck the THC off the receptors in the brain, and it'll have you come down.
Like regulates the high THC effect more.
From the psychoactive effect.
Got it. Good to know.
So just good to know. I'm like, always keep a bottle, a bottle of CBD.
Good to know.
CBD around. But so we have a couple things going on. We have people that we're taking recreational, illegal cannabis that was bred for high THC. So the reality is, if we were to go to the streets of Israel, naturally on the side of the road, you can pluck cannabis and smoke it. It's not gonna do what the cannabis in America is going to do, because it's not being modified. It was naturally there like a redwood tree. So because it became illegal, all the plants that were being sold in the underground market were being bred, genetically modified. Got it. Then on top of that, you have people growing that shouldn't be growing in closets. There's a lot of, there's mycotoxins, there's mold, there could be heavy metals. I mean, there's a lot of other things, residual solvents, where people don't know. They're not farmers. They don't know regenerative agriculture. So what I've seen clinically is that it's not the cannabis. In fact, I think there was one person that died last February because of the mold on cannabis. So not one person has died because of cannabis. Right. right? So they might, if something has happened, it's because of either something on it, or they've had a negative experience because it's been genetically modified for high THC.
Right.
And that's my case for regulation, for transparency, for third-party testing. Because honestly, Grayson, we haven't talked about this, but because you're unique, I'm unique, right? Just like you have muscle tone, you have an endocannabinoid tone. And at any given moment, I can take a blood test or a saliva test and take a look at what we call endocannabinoid tone, a balance of your cannabinoid 1 receptor and cannabinoid 2 receptor activity, okay? And actually in the future, I'm thinking we might be 3 years out, there's going to be a medical diagnosis code, ICD-13, 14, that says you have clinical endocannabinoid deficiency, and hopefully CBD will be covered under insurance, because there are like 18 to 24 human studies that have already proven if you have an endocannabinoid clinical deficiency.
Wow.
Okay. I mean, honestly, if you have a chronic disease, your endocannabinoid system is not working. So I tell people, if you have a symptom like tachycardia or high blood pressure, or let's just pick one. Let's just say that you have ADHD. Of course, go to brain health and go to the endocannabinoid system. Like, we have to add the endocannabinoid system onto whatever other system we're looking at.
Right.
At this point.
What do you, I love, first of all, thank you for just breaking down all of these facts, because I think this is, there's so much information out there, and to have this, it's to be inundated with this in the culture from so many different directions. It's nice to just hear, some of the nitty gritty of how this stuff works, why it's working. It's fantastic. And I want to ask you, outside of the kind of the factual context of this, right? Some of the scientific data, it points to a larger question that I'm curious, I would love to hear your thoughts on. And there are lots of practitioners, researchers, MAPS, that are just where they're studying the effects of psychedelics and cannabis and all these different things. For me, it always kind of begs this question of, if we have this system in our body, and it sort of goes back to that question I asked you before, what do you think it speaks to about the role of plants interfacing with people as a basis for living and well-being? Because it really is starting to, it just seems so apparent with this movement now that we've got people who, like you said, there's an identified system. It's in the body. And what do you think, outside of the scientific data, what commentary does that, what is that commentary about plants in relation to the human organism in terms of health, longevity, and just how we go through life, maybe even the spiritual component? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I love it. I love this question. I'm so glad no one's ever asked me this question. This is the best way I can impart. So first of all, we live in a society or a time where we're looking outside of ourselves to feel fed, to feel nourished.
Yes.
Okay. And we tend to, when we have a feeling we're uncomfortable with, we'll tend to shop or eat or work or use sex or whatever it is to fill that void. We don't feel comfortable. This is why when you do Qigong, martial arts, yoga, meditation, especially yoga, they say don't eat before class, because if you're full, how can you take in?
Correct.
What's going to inform you? So that's the first thing, right? So let's just talk about some of the plants. Like, when I'm looking at a human being in front of me, it's one of my patients, I'm assessing, what's the most important thing? How are they moving through the world?
Yeah.
How are they moving through the world? And this is the thing. If they are so, have been filling up and filling up and filling up to the point where they're numb, they're not in touch, I want to use a purgative.
Yes.
Right? So in some ways, ayahuasca, it's a purgative. Okay. So I'm just bare bones.
Yeah.
Second of all, with psilocybin, which is now legal in Colorado.
Yeah.
And Santa Cruz is going to have its first licensed marriage family therapist clinic with psilocybin and MDMA opening up in a couple months.
No way.
Yes.
Wow. That's huge.
Yes, it's huge, and that's heart medicine. When very similar to clean LSD is that when people we're spiritually bankrupt in this country. We don't have ritual.
Yes.
It's unfortunate, even with Chinese medicine in the 50s in China, the spirituality was taken from the medicine.
Yep.
We all have a personal responsibility of our own personal reconciliation with the world we live in, with who we are, regardless if you sleep. I mean, I hope that people get to sleep next to other people in their lifetime, but the journey is an alone one in some sense. Yeah. And I feel that plants, Mother Earth has everything we need. When you're in the womb, you get all the nutrients, you get all life from the umbilical cord, from your mom. And then now, once you take your first breath, once you're obviously off breastfeeding, Mother Earth will nourish you.
Yes.
Okay. Because of, at least I'll speak to America, we didn't know regenerative agriculture. We didn't know sustainable agriculture. So the food is minerally deficient, but also we didn't grow up in a culture with barefoot medicine, with our families, with our grandparents, really like some other cultures where plant medicine was part of a way of life. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of, Caucasian people, if I may, didn't have that. Mm-hmm. They didn't, and some did. So I would say plants are what we need, just as much as food. And I feel that also there is a way in our society, the way that it's built, it's learned behavior of wanting spiritual qualities, wanting to feel something, wanting to feel connected. And until we're able to understand that everything we need is within, if we need to find wholeness, we need to find happiness, we will keep buying things, buying that car, going after that job, looking outside of ourselves for happiness. And the plants all have messages. They all have purposes at a certain time. Yep. And if you can work with someone like us who understands plant medicine, obviously we have our Chinese pharmacopoeia, and there's Western and Ayurvedic herbs and all these other things from other countries. We can discern, does this person need a purgative? Does this person need to connect with their heart? Does this person need to connect with nature? Does this person need to, and it's just going to usher and foster the veil to be completely gone. Right. So then we can actually have a conversation about what really matters. Because in the end, if you sit with someone long enough in stillness, they get quiet enough. It's like the water element. Mm-hmm. And if you can ask the right questions and give it enough time, some people it's 20 minutes, some people it might be 8 or 9 hours. If you sit long enough and distill, none of that stuff matters. Honestly, the iPhone, no one wants that,
Agreed.
No one wants that. It's about relationships. People just want to be in each other's lives. They want to give love and receive love. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. I mean, it's pretty basic.
Yeah. Well, and it's a different type of sustenance. It's like we have like the material sustenance, and then we have the immaterial sustenance. And a lot of these things that you're talking about, I think it's like you said, I like that term, spiritually bankrupt. We lack ritual. There's these things that give us so much life force that can't technically be measured, and that's the hard thing I think for people to get in the West is we're such a measured culture. Right. If it's not, repeated in a scientific laboratory and we can't just put the numbers to it, then it's not worth anything, or it's just a waste of time. And I think that's such a scary place to be because I agree. Like what you're saying is right on point. That's why I asked the question. I wanted to hear, someone else's thoughts on this. And, that thing you said, like that the plants have a message. That's the thing when I'm talking about adaptogens, or I'm even talking about foods in the environment. We look at mushrooms like shiitake or any of these things that are, you look at what they do in the ecosystem, and then you look at the function of what they do in the body. There's often some very strong parallels. And so what I always tell my clients too, I'm saying when you're eating a food, you're eating a story also. That's like the story that it's lived in the ecosystem, that story is going to be told in your body because it's done something on the outside. And I think that's a framework, I think with all of this stuff that people have to start getting if we want to have any kind of real forward traction and just a deeper understanding of health. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing as opposed to just, it's not just dead, devoid material we're taking into our body. We're taking in things that have come from a living organism, right?
That's right.
And if you can get to like understand that planet Earth is alive, and it's giving off some kind of fruits, in every form, then I think that's that relationship that we're just trying to get back to. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
Are we interfacing with these things that are supposed to do these things inside of our bodies, right? There's just this, it's a bigger conversation, but I'm glad that you're having it with your clients and that you're being, where you are right now is so cool. And that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, was just like, you're in this position where this medicine, which has such tremendous health benefits, and there's so much there that people can benefit from, the dialogue and the conversation is opening, which is, if we can't have conversations, regardless of how triggered we get, like, where do we go? The country's so polarized as it is now, it's immediate outrage, immediate offense. And it's like, whoa, hold on. Like, let's have a reasonable conversation about this stuff and see where we can get, where we can actually go from here. So, let me ask you this too, Leta, because this has come up many times, and I'm asking for my own personal curiosity and from clientele, which I say I have to refer you out because I don't know fully the answer to this. So there's a lot of people listening to this who are going to be like, all right, pot is pot. I can smoke pot every day, and I'm going to be getting my CBD fix, and awesome, wonderful. And can we talk about that? The distinction between, so breaking it down into like layers, right? Most optimal, I'm assuming, is, the extracted CBD oil that's come from like a pristine company, or, the quality is really there. Yeah. But then we've got the different ways, we've got eating it, we've got smoking it, we've got vaporizing it, talking about those different layers, and then what medicinal effect comes from each one of those layers, if any, the degrees of goodness and quote unquote badness within all of those methods of delivery. I would like to know that. And I know there are lots of people who are very curious, like, is the occasional joint bad? Is there any benefit from that? Like, and how much are we getting?
Totally. Great question. Yeah. Love your questions. We could talk all day. The one thing I want to mention just before we move into the delivery methods is that what I love about who we are in the world as Chinese medical practitioners is that my goal is for people to have a support team. It's not if something happens, it's when. Right. And I feel that, I want to know someone's constitution and all that kind of thing. Sure. But what happens, like with the plant medicine and with any aspect of Chinese medicine, just to finalize the conversation on plants, is that it's like a midwife. It's a facilitator, right? It's ushering in you to wake up before you get a diagnosis. Yes. So that's the interesting thing about 2-AG, 2-arachidonoglycerol. It's like when you can take that oil in from the plant, or if you can get your body to make more of it, it's your motivation to thrive, to be here and be living. Like, that's huge, to be on purpose.
That's good medicine. That is good medicine.
It's really good medicine. It's like heart one, right? Utmost source. It's a resuscitation point. Mm-hmm. Okay. So delivery methods, let's talk about it.
Yeah, okay. Let's jump into that.
When I first started to do my research, I realized no wonder why there's so many potheads, because regardless, they were craving, even though they were probably unconscious about it, they're craving the cannabis, the receptors, right? Yes. So I kind of get that, okay? Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways. So let's talk about inhalation. There's smoking and vaping. Mm-hmm. I can give you obviously specific recommendations, but this is the deal. It's not all created equal. Yep. So with smoking, it's not good for your health. Mm-hmm. But with vaping, same thing, depending on what you're using. I mean, there are some companies now, there's only like 2 or 3 where you can vape a pure flower. It's not, it's very similar to juicing, where you want to make sure the enzymes are not being burnt off. Right. So there's certain technologies now where it's not going to be harmful. Mm-hmm. But I do the 80-20 rule. There's going to be people that love cannabis and want to do it recreationally, and then you're going to have your therapeutic dose. Right. Recreationally, I think 80-20, right? So when you want to have cannabis in your life and smoking is something that you just like to do, then great. Do it on a Friday or Saturday. Mm-hmm. Have it just be part of the, your rec, glass of wine, whatever. Yeah. But in order to get the therapeutic dose, of the cannabinoids crossing the blood-brain barrier, I believe that some of these other delivery systems are going to be more important. Okay, so when is the only time I recommend inhalation? I have recommended vaping to a couple of my chronic pain patients, and they do it every hour, because with inhalation method, it goes in within 1 to 3 minutes to the bloodstream, and it lasts about 1 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
So it's fast onset, but it's a quick duration.
Right.
So you have to keep doing. That's why you see people keep vaping.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
There's transdermal, right? So you have through the skin. Some of the technology is pretty amazing. So if you're using a cream and it's staying on the skin, it's not being absorbed. Patches are good unless you have a lot of hair or you're older and you have loose skin. But I like patches because they get into the bloodstream within 15 to 30 minutes, but they can last 8 to 12 hours.
Wow.
Okay. But topicals are also good. They'll get into the blood half an hour to an hour. And they last 2 to 3 hours. So like if you have tennis elbow, and it's nice because patches and lotions are local.
Right. Right.
Okay. But that's never going to replace internal. You have to understand I'm an internal person all the way. So how do we get internal? Well, there's suppositories. There's ingestibles. So ingestibles, I would say, usually are mostly THC. I feel like if you're going to do CBD, why get the sugar with the gummies?
Right.
I don't really recommend edibles at all, because even if you're doing THC, get the THC dropper, get a CBD dropper, 2 different products, 2 different oils, and you can be exact in the measurement. Because as you're digesting the cookie or the brownie or the butter or whatever it is, as you're digesting, it's continuing to release delta-9. So you're going to continue to get the psychoactive effect. It's really hard to regulate. So I don't really recommend it. Like on a recreational standpoint, that's fine. And I want to talk about the 4 different ways to get a tincture in. So in the beginning of this conversation, we talked about receptors.
Yes.
Okay. Receptors in your gut. We know the brain-gut connection. Dr. Mark Hyman. So if you have, for instance, IBS, or you have something in the gut, it's nice to have a tincture where it's being released in the gut. So the CBD oil would be an MCT oil, alcohol, coconut oil, olive oil, because then you're digesting it in the gut, you're assimilating it, and then you're absorbing it.
Right.
Now, the issue with that is when you have a gut issue, you might not assimilate and absorb, better, right? So there's that. But because of the brain-gut connection, I recommend taking a tincture that's sublingual. Okay, so it's it's a little bit tricky. So with anyone that has a gut issue, they can choose. If they can afford it, I'll have them do a coconut oil or MCT oil or alcohol based or something, CBD oil. But I also have them do the brain one, right? So like because when you're doing a sublingual, it can cross, or even on the tongue, which is a sound frequency sonication, it's going to cross the blood-brain barrier in 5 to 15 seconds.
Wow.
And when we tested the blood, it's going to last anywhere from 4 to 6 hours. I mean, 4 pretty strong. So you have to play around a little bit, but for my American patients that don't have good digestion, I don't touch the oils that have to be absorbed through the stomach, because cannabis is still an expensive molecule right now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that's kind of how I do it. So I leave smoking for the recreational part. Suppositories are really important for a lot of different reasons. Topicals and transdermals are great, but you still need the tincture. So as an herbalist, you probably know this from Chinese medicine, I love tinctures.
Yeah, tinctures are awesome. Yeah.
They're pretty amazing.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Well, and so just to kind of like recap and, distill all that information down, it sounds like, obviously like the quality products that you're talking about are kind of like the top one. And then if people are going to engage in cannabis recreationally, this also really points to, just like anything, like with food, there should be that we should be looking for as consumers, basically quality cannabis that has been tested for pesticides and for molds and these kinds of things. So I know even there are dispensaries here in Sacramento that are of the organic branding, which they are, and they're still a medical facility. They're not even recreational. You still have to have a medical card to get to these kinds of facilities. They're not just openly recreational. And apparently there's still some distinction in that, where they can stay as a medical cannabis facility and a quote unquote recreational ones. There's a different thing there, but it sounds like collectively, just like our food, we need to be looking for quality cannabis, more or less.
So just like our food,
yep,
and our herbs, all herbs and plant medicine, we ideally want it grown under the earth, underneath the sun. You want the full spectrum of the sun. Mm-hmm. You don't want it modified. Mm-hmm. You want a pure seed. You want organic, USDA organic.
Yes.
And then this is the thing. There's different levels of conversation. The last two things I'll say on this is that I have a lot of patients that went through AA. They don't want something that has alcohol in it because a lot of the CBD has alcohol in it. So that's the first thing. Uh-huh. The second thing is, even with children or, some people do not want any THC. Right. Right. So companies are also taking the THC out. Some people want a little THC. That's, enough. But they're still not going to get psychoactive effect. Mm-hmm. So everybody has different values. It's very similar to health. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And the last thing I'll say is that, things are going to be changing, right? Right now, people know about THC and people know about CBD. Yes. Okay. Now, some farmer harvested his cannabis too early by accident, and what they discovered is there was a lot of CBG in it. So that's the next largest cannabinoid that's going to be popular. You'll probably hear about it next year. Okay. You're doing clinical trials on it. They're finding the medical benefits of CBG. When you have it, it helps CBD work like 10 times better. So that's going to happen. But this is what I would say. Most people need a general CBD as like a multivitamin, right? Uh-huh. Got it. Environmental toxins, EMFs, things you can't control, mold, alcohol, pharmaceuticals. You're going to need like a general tonic. When you see someone when our patients see us, we can do like a Lu Hui Di Han Wan. But we might want to do a modification. So cannabis right now has gotten to the point where we're working on, at least for me in my practice, if you have a specific issue, I can say to you, I might want you to do CBD, maybe a little CBG, but I want it to have a lot more beta-caryophyllene, a lot more limonene, because you have a predisposition or you're worried about Alzheimer's or dementia or MS. Right. So I just want to make note that when people are buying CBD, and they might say, it's linalool dominant or beta-caryophyllene dominant or myrcene or humulene, like these terpenes and flavonoids have medical benefits we know about. And so we're going to be able to customize based and make a better recommendation. But for now, most people can do really well with a general CBD tonic. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay, well that's very helpful. And I guess my next question to this is those 4 layers of delivery method, right, that we're talking about, and the people that this is applicable to. So obviously, I've had people ask me this, and I've just genuinely said I don't know because the information is too conflicting from an online searching point. But breastfeeding moms, pregnant moms, in regards to, because I've had women who say, being a mom, my wife, we have a 3-year-old, my wife, it's a full-time gig for moms when they're just doing stuff. They're so busy. And I've had women ask me, they're like, great, to be honest, back pain from carrying the kid. They're like, if I smoke or vape a little bit of cannabis, I just notice that my back pain goes down. I feel better. Yeah. But they're always sort of just being conscientious moms. They're like, is that okay if I vaporize while I'm breastfeeding? Is that going to cause some, there's so much, I think just from times previous to, so much propaganda that people are terrified. They're just like, oh, they have this kind of, freak out panic response. So in relation to that, what does the safety look like for the pregnant moms and the breastfeeding moms if they want cannabis in their lives, but they're not necessarily doing oils, but can they do oils? And then how do those other delivery methods relate to them?
That's great. That's a great question. So in October, I went to a medical conference for MDs just on cannabis, and it was international. I mean, people flew in from all over, and they presented their latest clinical trials. I'll mention 2. I want to, first of all, 100% success rate getting people off opioids. Wow. 100%.
It's amazing.
I just want to say that.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Not in this country. Hopefully we're getting there. But the second one was the presentation on, if a woman has cramps, menstrual cramps, from the time, debilitating, like she misses work or school, it's 6 full years of her life. So from the age 13 to 48, 6 full years she's in bed.
That is rough.
And they've been able to cure it with cannabinoids.
Wow.
I mean, I always say, well, don't forget Moxa. But yeah.
Right.
But to answer your question, they did a study with pregnant people. They also presented, and I'm happy to share this study because they said there's not been one issue. And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people. Let's just say they even did 10,000 women. Maybe it was 100,000. I'll have to get the study. First 3 trimesters while pregnant, 3 months, I'm sorry, and last trimester. Completely safe.
Wow.
Okay? Now, as far as breastfeeding, I would say it has to be clean. Yes, they can use it. I mean, this is the deal, Grayson. FDA, Trump, he wouldn't have passed CBD to be legal in all 50 states with certain companies, right? Certain products.
Right.
If they haven't tested it. I mean, again, they have the patent for 20 years. I mean, they know the benefits. So I just would adhere that with breastfeeding moms, you would want to make sure it's clean, which might be an extra $20 or something.
Sure,
but just making sure there's no residual solvents, no mold, no mycotoxins, heavy metals, stuff like that. So that's what I would say.
And that's for that's for the moms that are maybe don't have the coin, right? They're not going to spend money on maybe the oils, but if they were to get an organically grown, high quality cannabis and they were to vape, there seems to be, thus far, it seems like everything is green light. It's okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Beautiful. Because I've had people ask me that, and women, and I'm like, I don't know. It's a good question that I wanted to have people get value from having this conversation. So, Dr.
And
Leta,
and if they're your patient, just know that smoking is drying to the lungs with wind deficiency, and so
there's always the considerations that we have to.
Yeah, and that's why I want people to see us so we can just give them the best experience. Part of just the work I'm doing is I want people to have a long-term healthy relationship with cannabis.
Yes.
Cannabis means CBD, it means THC. I don't want someone to have a bad experience with cannabis because they need it.
Right. Absolutely. No, I'm with you. I totally am on the same page. Well, given this is a huge topic and you've done an amazing job of just distilling it down and making it accessible, which is really nice because there is a lot of confusion out there. So thank you for that. But in this larger context, I would say of this conversation, cannabis, Chinese medicine, is there anything else that you want to, I guess, dive into or offer up as just your take on medicine, what you're seeing? Because like I said, with Chinese medicine practitioners and any practitioner that I talk to, if they practice Ayurveda, I'm always of the mind is that we're going to learn a methodology of medicine. We're going to learn a methodology of skill, whether that's martial arts, and every person is going to bring their own unique stamp to it. And it always is a question I want to ask people, in terms of your unique stamping in this larger context, right? Whether it's cannabis medicine, Chinese medicine, is there any stuff that's just on your plate that you're like, yeah, this is worth talking about for a quick minute? Because I like to open that up for people because I think, the mark you're leaving is unique because it's you, and the same thing I'm doing and other practitioners. So yeah, the floor is yours. I just wouldn't want to, not to put you too much on the spot, but we're here. So I always like to ask.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. I think the most important thing for me now is, I have a unique skill set for vision. I have a unique ability of being able to sit in front of one and understand the place they live their life from. And I believe that medicine is being a master of your energy, your chi. Are you leaking or blocking? Are you leaking money, energy, love? Are you blocking energy, money, love?
Yes.
What can we do in the path of least resistance, the most efficient way for you to start feeling better, being in your power, to really just have you come out in the world? I mean, I think it's our birthright to feel good. I feel like it's our only job to feel good.
Absolutely.
And be happy. And I feel like people are not sure. There's been, I feel like, learned behavior, these shoulds, these, this comparison. There's a lot of underlying stuff. So, what I do, what I think right now for me as a Chinese doctor in America and what my gifts are and what I'm seeing as common threads as far as us as a whole is that when you can create some awareness. And this is why working with someone like us or a therapist, other people, our friend circle, we have these blind sides. We have this underlying operating system that we live our life from. And we update our iPhones.
Yeah.
Have you done a software update, to have a hardware update? Are you, so it's one of those things where, are you seeing? Do you have vision? Are you really seeing? Are you listening? Are you really hearing? I mean, there's a little bit of discernment there. And I feel that I want us to ask better questions. I want us to have more courage to speak to, the elephant in the room or what's really laying in our hearts. I think that most of us want to save face.
Yes.
We want to please. We want to be seen. Our egos are running rampant. We want to feel good. We want to belong. And I feel that if you're not really clear on your deepest intention in anything, in buying something, in serving someone, in making someone dinner, in doing business, if you're not clear on who you are, how do you know what to put your attention on? So I always tell people, at the end of the day, what did you think about the most? Because if you were to fast forward, I always have my patients do this exercise. It's your 100th birthday. You're sitting in front of, 100 people. Yeah. You're celebrating your legacy. You've done everything you want. You've become everything you want. What are you going to do in the next hour? Like, you have to know with conviction, with every cell in your body, that you are designing this life. Yeah. You get to have anything you want. Oprah puts on her pants the same way as the Dalai Lama and Mother Teresa. And I mean, we're all human.
Yes.
We all have this capacity to be anybody. And the only thing that's limiting us is ourself. And it's really up to us. And so, and the one thing that I say, which might be a little harsh to especially some of my new patients, but I'm good. I love my life. I'm so happy, and I want to help you. And I really put that self-responsibility that until you're willing to start with yourself and figure out how to really be happy, you will not have the connections and the love and the experience that you really want. Yeah. I know that. That's true.
I thank you. That's a really good answer. And I agree in a bunch of different ways, but the thing that there's so many ways, there's so many threads I could go with what you just said. And I feel like that's what you said, right? Talking about the elephant in the room, the difficult conversations. And I had this conversation with Kat Lee, who was just on last week. I interviewed her and she was saying, we had this conversation about leaning into the hard edges. The things that are difficult in our life, I think right now, especially, right, culturally, politically, the country is polarized, families are polarized, people are polarized, and we're getting into this place where, again, the art of conversation and discussion, it's a rare thing to see nowadays where people can disagree about something, right? Someone who is, say, pro-Trump and who isn't. Mm-hmm. And for people to meet respectfully and say, I really think that's a bullshit position and here's why, but I'm going to stay calm. Let's just talk about it and explore the idea. And I feel like that skill is getting lost, and it's so critical. Mm-hmm. And there's a fundamental resiliency that I think we need to develop to go through this process. There's nothing about life that's easy. There's beautiful upswings that are just like amazing. And then there's like, oh my God, what the hell is this? And what did I sign up for? Like, what is going on? Because life gets pretty rough. There's some patches that are just not easy to go through. Mm-hmm. And I think, I use the metaphor for herbs, some of them, like those adaptogenic herbs, like goji berries, they grow in dryness, drought, cold, freezing temperatures, hot sun, changes in climate, and they come out with this amazing ability to do things inside of us. But it's like, if that plant hadn't been adaptable and resilient in its, the stressors and the influences, then we're not going to really get anywhere. And I feel like that's what's sometimes being lost, is that resiliency right now. And that is a trained skill that we have to push ourselves into, right? The cold showers, the saunas, the difficult conversations, right? Eating bitter foods that are like, that tastes like crap, but it's going to be really good for me. There's a certain amount of that. And I appreciate that you said that, because I think that's a big piece, and then it allows you to kind of know what you're made of, and you get to access some cooler stuff, right? You get to access some of that higher frequency that we all are entitled to. But it is work, right?
Yeah.
It's work.
It's work. It's work. What's that phrase? Whatever's in your way is the way.
Right. The obstacle is the path, right?
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
And we are calling in the exact people and the exact experiences that we need for our curriculum for growth.
Yes.
And I feel that, I'm grateful for it. I feel like there's this beautiful design, there's this human intelligence, the creation intelligence.
Right.
And I feel that, the more I can get out of my own way and be available, and the more that you can eat foods that are fuel, that are pure light and life force.
Yeah.
I feel like at this point in my life, Grayson, the universe is matching my, not to be woo-woo, but matching my vibration.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the more that I'm getting healthier, the more that I'm, speaking about things that might be scary or around my relationship with love or my relationship with money, the things that hold a lot of energetic charge, boom, I'm calibrating here. And that feels good. That feels good. And then I'm attracting better patients that really want to dig deep, or more fun vacations, or longer time, so it's really interesting. Once you make the investment, it's all we're getting is being blessed. So it's amazing to be on the journey and being in a time where people really want to be happy. People want to be in community. They want to be healthier. And I think it's an exciting time. I'm very hopeful.
Me too. I mean, I have faith in humanity. As rough and as ugly as it gets on this planet, I think, fundamentally people are good, and we have to keep fighting the good fight and keep pushing, in the directions that we want to go. And it's not always easy, but it's a fight worth fighting. That's for sure. So Dr. Leta, my last little bit here is my two little prong question to wrap this up is, if people are hearing this and they're like, man, I want to get in on some high quality CBD oil, who do I talk to? Where do I go? Maybe companies or ways to approach that. And then the last bit is just, how can people follow you? Social media, website, the information where people want to, use you and look you up as a resource. So those two things I think are important.
Thanks. Well, I would say, depending on where you live, there's a lot of companies, especially with CBD, you can buy online. So the topicals I like, there's a company called CBD Clinic. There's a company called Papa and Barkley. I mean, I'm happy to give resources out anytime if people want to email me. Yeah. Lotions, patches, and stuff like that. Now, with transdermal, with topical, you can have THC in them, especially if you're using them for pain and inflammation, and you won't get high. So there's a little bit around topicals that I like having THC in them.
Yep.
But some of the CBD, of course, is very beneficial. And then as far as certain flowers, if people are wanting to smoke, again, I can't stress enough, just be asking, a dispensary, or the farmer that or if you're wanting to cultivate on your own, and of course, if it's legal and you have a license, but, follow the basic principles of food, making sure, really understanding where your food's coming from. More importantly, where is your cannabis coming from to have it be clean, and how you buy which flower, depending on which seed, depends on your health goals, right? And how you're wired. Okay. So I would say I think it's pretty inexpensive. I have an online telehealth practice. I also have a clinic based in Santa Cruz, and my telehealth practice, I do cannabinoid profiling. So if someone has a chronic disease or a symptom, or they're just really wanting to know the right cannabinoid, terpene, and flavonoid profile for depression or ADHD based on genetics, that's what I do in my practice. And then I can give them a very specific recommendation on, you should buy this product, and then you can go into your local dispensary and buy it. Again, I don't make any money off it, but it's nice to be able to, if someone wants to have cannabis as part of their, supplement regimen, I want them to get something that's going to work, because if you're taking beta-carotene versus limonene in even your flower or your tincture, that might rev you up or bring you down, and it depends on your goal. Right. So I do that. It's about $150, but then you have that for life. It's great. It's pretty amazing. And then as far as just a general tincture, as far as CBD, it's going to depend on if they want it in olive oil, coconut oil, MCT oil, alcohol, if they want sublingual, if they want a whole plant extract, and which terpenes they want in it. Right. But there's a couple companies I like, and it depends on where you live. So what I would say is, My website is drleta.com. So doctor spelled out Leta. And same with Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, all those other ones. That's my brand.
Great.
But the best thing I can do is I wrote up, and I try to keep it updated, which topicals, and again, you have to buy them online. I won't make any money from them, but
Sure.
I'm happy to give those recommendations out. In my private practice, I do carry a couple, and I have an online store. So if people do want, of course, you can buy from me. And, people can go to my website and buy a bottle of CBD oil. The reason I chose this one brand as far as like the multivitamin of them is because you don't have to digest it. There's no alcohol in it for my AA patients. There's no THC in it, organic, non-GMO. But it has, not only does it have a whole plant extract, it has CBD, high levels of CBG in it. It has 7 terpenes, CBN. It has everything that I'm seeing that people need based on American lifestyle.
Very cool.
Yeah. So
it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate the time. Your passion is easy to see and to feel, and and you've got so much information and knowledge, and it's nice to have someone passionately sharing it and making it accessible, because like I said, the conversation needs to be had. There are a ton of people that are curious. So I just appreciate you being willing to share it so openly, and just contributing what you are. I love this topic, and I love what you're doing. So I'm in full support.
Thank you, Grayson.
Yeah, you bet.
You're a blessing.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Well, Dr. Leta, thank you. Really appreciate it. So we'll have you back on. I'm sure at some point we'll have much more to talk about. So thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Grayson.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.